Hello, and you're welcome back to this week's Unfiltered Autistic podcast. Almost forgot the name of my own podcast there. Sorry, it's too early in the morning for myself. This week, I am joined by an incredible Mayo woman that I got to hear speak very recently at a fantastic Ballina Autism Friendly Town launch. Her name is Rebecca Connor Wood. She's an autistic activist, I suppose a fellow Mayo woman, and all around, I would say, incredible human being who has quite the life story to talk to us all about today. Now, just as a trigger warning, there will be mention of suicidal ideation potentially in this podcast today. So if this is something that you might find triggering or overwhelming, please don't continue to listen. Now, Rebecca has the most, I would say, oh my gosh, the most. Oh gosh, I just remember listening to you, Rebecca, at the
Mm.
Balna Autism Friendly. Like the whole room was captivated. Like I just remember sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, this lady! People need to hear this story." But Rebecca has a very I suppose, overwhelming is the way I would say it. And the fact that you're here today, being the incredible person that you are, I just think you're outstanding. She has an overwhelming, I suppose, life story. And I'm going to touch on a few of the topics now that Rebecca's going to speak on. I've obviously mentioned suicidal ideation, late in life autism identification, diagnosis, school avoidance, mental health, I suppose, eating differences. There's such a storyline here that I really want, and not even a storyline, a real life lived experience that I really want you all to listen to. And in particular, if you're a parent, a professional, but in particular, professional working, say, in the clinical sphere, to really understand why it's so important that we do listen to, individuals that are presenting with, autistic lived experiences and maybe unfortunately being misidentified earlier in their lives or not at all being identified, with any kind of support needs. I think it's really important. So I'm going to move on now. For the rest of this podcast, I am intentionally not going to be, asking too many questions because I do feel that Rebecca's story is so powerful that you just, if you'd like to grab a cup of tea, sit back and listen, and then consider your own role, maybe as the parent, the professional, as to why an early in life autism identification or diagnosis is so important. So I'm going to hand you over now to Rebecca to properly introduce herself, because I always say, oh, I'm always not so great at that piece. So I'm going to properly hand over now to Rebecca, and I will go on silent so you get to hear her story. So Rebecca's going to introduce herself and I suppose talk about her life and what has led to, I suppose, her today being the incredible person that she is. Not only is she an incredible autistic advocate, a parent, I suppose a brilliant wife. I mean, I'm sure if your husband was here in the room, he'd agree, but she's also the PRO of Ballina Autism Friendly Town and also the Mayo Disabled Persons Organisation as well. So an incredibly busy activist at that. So I'm going to hand over now. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Rebecca, and I suppose give that lived experience account of growing up unidentified, what occurred along the way, and I suppose where you are today. So thanks to everyone for listening.
Okay, so I'm, as Amanda said, Rebecca Connor Wood, and you've kind of touched on the introduction, so I'll probably just go straight into my life story, I suppose, because I've been autistic from the start. Um, so yeah, so like Amanda was saying, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 26, and along the way, I had a lot of difficulty because of that. Um, So I suppose starting school, right? That's the kind of the start for everybody when things start to shift a bit or become obvious that you're slightly different. Um, I went to a mainstream primary school. It was actually lovely. I loved my primary school. Um, However, the schooling side of things was very difficult. Um, I, from a young age, went to, what would you call it? I think they called it a remedial class back then. I don't know what that means.
Back, I think we're now. I think I'm almost 20 years older than you. What age are you now? Or do you don't have to say? I'm 40.
30.
Okay, so no, I'm not 20. I'm 14 years older than you. Back in the day for myself, I think they called it like the resource worker or the resource teacher,
Mm.
but it might be called, you're much younger. You're different, born from a different few decades than myself. So it might have been called something else, but my
We're
time it was
different
called.
species.
Yeah, literally, I've like too many wrinkles to even suggest I could potentially be 14
Oh.
years younger. But yeah, I think back in my day, it was called, was it like a resource teacher or something?
Okay. Yeah, well, I think I was probably 6 or 7 when I started going in there randomly. I can't My mum and dad can't remember why. I wasn't given, like, a specific reason. They were just like, "She needs a bit extra." So I was thrown in there, and, a lovely teacher helped me with different, English, Irish, maths, I suppose. English and maths would be the main things because I struggled massively with handwriting and I struggled with spelling. And that kind of went on for years. I stopped having help there. And it was kind of like they just assumed because I didn't pass the dyslexia criteria and a few other things that I don't know. They didn't know what to do with me. So I was just in the classroom learning my own way. And I had a difficult time. I had a difficult time. I loved, school in certain ways. I think I liked the routine of it and the predictability, but I also really, really struggled socially. I have an amazing friend called Amy who, I met from the start. We had brothers, older brothers the same age, and they were friends, so we sort of knew of each other. And actually we have, funny enough, we have, cousins in common, which is quite funny. We didn't realize that till we were about 6 or 7. We were at a family party and spotted each other, and we're like, "Why are you here?" And she was like, "Why are you here? They're my cousins first." Um, but anyways, me and Amy became really, really close, and Amy is, oh, like, throughout my life, she has been one of the biggest sources of calm, I suppose. My husband and Amy are like the 2 people that could help me feel calm in any environment. Um, and I really stuck to Amy. She was very predictable and she likes things to be a particular way. So that was great for me because, we got each other and she was always there, whereas, and she was always very direct in a very polite kind of way. Amy, yeah, like I said, very predictable compared to other people. So I found like the female groups of children from a quite a young age, I found it really difficult because they were changing the rules all the time, right? And it used to drive me nuts. And I'd come home and be like, Dad, they changed the rules again of this game. And I don't like it, Dad. um, and then I'd have a report of the sort of the unjust that was happening in the classroom of, oh, this person was mean to that person. And he said I'd come home and it would be like a police report of of what was going on because I loved rules so much that like the social rules were so important to me too. And they weren't so important to other people. And that was very difficult to me. So I along with Amy, I tended to cling to male friends because I found them, far more predictable, straightforward, sometimes blunt, but that was fine. Um, and I mean, the girls were lovely, like in primary school, but it was kind of like they were speaking a different language to me, and I found that tough. Um, and then I suppose in the classroom, it was overwhelming. It was loud, and I had a certain teacher for 2 years who made things quite difficult because I was assumed to be neurotypical, I suppose. It was like, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? I was the kind of kid that would get my work done really quickly, but it wouldn't necessarily be done perfectly. Not that you'd expect a child to do everything perfectly, but the teacher would be quite harsh on me. And that made things very difficult. I think that's the point where I started to struggle with going to school. I was sick a lot, like genuinely physically ill, but also ill from anxiety, which is genuinely physically
Sounds a lot
ill
like
too, but
burnout,
a
doesn't
different
it?
source. 100%.
Yeah.
This started about 10, I reckon, 9 or 10. 3rd or 4th class, I don't know, is that age. Um, and I didn't really have help with managing that. I think the only people that recognized that was my parents because I would come home and need to sleep, or just do absolutely nothing for ages. Um, and my mind's gone blank there. I suppose,
You were saying like the burnout around the third, fourth class, around the years of 10, and that
yes,
your family were the only people really that were kind of
yeah,
really understanding what they were actually seeing in school, just thought maybe, oh, well, why can't you just do it like everybody else? You're like, because I'm not like everybody else, but nobody knew yet.
yeah, yeah. And I sort of self-managed that by masking, obviously, the old M word, and also by taking like movement breaks for myself, which meant getting so sick from anxiety that I had to go to the sick bay, and that was my break. So most days I was at the sick bay, and I felt so ill. Like my parents had me brought to so many different doctors wondering what was wrong with my stomach. Now I did have gastritis, so I was put on medication for that, but it was like
But maybe that
beyond
was
what it
linked
should
to
have been.
the anxiety, do you
Yeah,
think?
perhaps, yeah. And I, yeah, in my little my little sick bay, I would miraculously be recovered after a few minutes because I was able to have that calm and quiet, and it was this weird little cubby off the main corridor, and, it was really small and dark, and I just loved that. It was like a little hangout space, and, at the time, they were probably thinking, "What is going on with her? She's sick every day, and then she's fine again." But that was my sort of self-managing, I suppose, in quite a destructive way, like, because it was making me feel so ill and so anxious. But that's how I got through the day, and then would come home and, be wrecked, and, like, that was me through primary school. I really struggled, but I had Amy and Donna, I suppose, as well, would have been very good friends for me, and that really helped, and we're still good friends. They were my bridesmaids. So I was very lucky in the sense that I clung to Amy from quite a young age, and a lot of people don't have that. A lot of autistic people aren't lucky enough to have, like, a solid friend throughout life, and that's one of the things I think that helped me in primary school massively, because she was always in my classroom. Um, and I could always confide in her, and she understood me, I think, more than certain adults did. Um, she just knew what I needed before I even knew it. And even now, as an adult, she just knows me so well, um, which was really helpful. Sorry, this is becoming the Amy podcast. She's going to be like, Rebecca, why are you talking about me? Um, but going into secondary school, then everything changes. There was no help transitioning for me because obviously no diagnosis, didn't really know why I struggled with things. And I realized I went to an all girl primary or secondary school, very difficult for me. But my friends were going there, so I wanted to go there. Familiarity, wanted that consistency. And Amy was in my classroom. There's 5 different first year classrooms. She was there. That was great. But, the moving around, the trying to, organize yourself, the, like, 70 different teachers that you had, it was a lot, and I worked out fairly quickly. I was quite a bigger kid, and I would get bullied for that, um, and in first year, I worked out that if I was really funny, people wouldn't see that necessarily. They would just overlook that. So I was like peak hilarity at 13. I I sort of honed in on that and tried to be as funny and entertaining as possible. And then I suppose my schoolwork suffered a little bit for that because I
It's
didn't
another
put as
form
much
of
attention
masking
to
as
that.
well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like absolutely. I was once again so tired when I got home. And I think towards the second half of first year, I just crashed. Like,
Shut
I
down.
woke up one morning and was like, "I can't go in. I can't do it." Once again, that stomach, that anxiety, I was having panic attacks, and it was pretty horrendous.
And you
Um,
dropped out then for a number of years after that, wasn't it?
yeah, I didn't go to school for 5 years.
And where
I
were you
was
then
a
during that time?
at home.
And were you
Um,
being educated at home or no?
I was educating myself. I was really lucky in that my parents, in hindsight, did not push me. They helped me, and they tried to get psychological help, to help me get in, and I was told, by a HSE psychologist, that, "Oh, everyone finds school tough." And I'd been out of school for 3 years at that point, and at that point as well, I was showing signs of what turned out to be anorexia, and that was, I suppose, one, a way of changing myself physically in the hopes that people would be kinder to me. And then also it was a means of control and coping, I guess, as well. And I was told then, like I'd lost a lot of weight by 16, um, half my body weight.
Oh
And I
my
was
gosh,
told that I
the
wasn't
trauma.
thin enough to have an eating disorder by the same psychologist. So that was like a trigger of, well, you need to lose more weight. Do you know what I mean? It
Yeah,
was
shocking.
you're not small enough yet, clearly, because people don't see this. And yeah, my mental health massively struggled. I couldn't go into school. There was one teacher, one lovely, lovely teacher who sent home English homework to me. And that made me feel like still connected and a little bit hopeful that, oh, maybe I could get back if I had the right help. But we got a letter from Tuzla saying that they're going to find my mum. And that was it. We never heard anything again. Not from the school. I always joke I could be dead, like they haven't checked. Um, and that was it. Like that lovely teacher continued for the five
And did
years.
you later then to do leaving cert, or did you do any state exams, or what did you do then? Say when school finished, what happened? We'll say, were you still there, or
So I actually, like I said, with the anorexia, I ended up going to hospital in Dublin.
okay?
I was admitted for, I think, 5 months, 4 or 5 months.
Oh my gosh! And that was because of
Um,
anorexia, is it?
yes,
Gosh,
yeah.
I'm so
But
sorry.
then they brought me in and were like, "You'll be here 2 weeks. We'll come up with a meal plan and, sort those things." And I was like, "Grand, I can do 2 weeks." And then to the end of 2 weeks, it was like, "Oh, no, there's more going on here. We need you for another while." And I got 6 different diagnoses, of
Oh my gosh.
mental illness, and I do wonder now how many of those were actually just me being autistic and it not being recognized.
Hmm.
And I mean, I was when you're in that environment, you're there 24/7, obviously, nighttime, daytime, you're having therapy every day, group therapy, you're having, art classes, and we actually had school there too. We had an hour a day, and that's where I fell back in love with knowledge, I suppose. We had a lovely teacher called Sean, and he was like, "Why aren't you in school?" He was like, "You're perfectly capable. Everybody here is perfectly capable. You just need the right school." Um, and I fell in love with biology. He taught biology and he taught us a bit of English. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. I'm learning about how the body works." I felt really inspired, and it was a good distraction from all of the psychological help I was getting, I suppose. And Sean sort of relit that fire in me and got me excited about learning. And he went about it himself to find schools in my area and set up meetings.
Wow, what a
Um,
teacher.
right? He didn't tell me, okay, but I think that was a good thing in hindsight because I would have just been like, "No, don't do that."
It's a no from me. There's the
Yeah,
avoidance coming back.
absolutely not coming in. And he was like, "Look, just go and meet them and see what happens." So I went to the first one, which wasn't in my town, but my parents were willing to travel, but if it was the right fit. At that point, they were coming up to Dublin, like from Ballina, so 3-ish hours maybe of a drive twice a week. I was allowed home for the weekends, and then they'd come in for family therapy. Everybody was offered that as well. And they were already traveling so much. They were like, "What's a trip to somewhere else in Mayo? Will be grand." We went to that school and I met with the vice principal and she said, I was really excited. I was like, "This is new, possibly a new chapter, fantastic." And she said, "Are you over the bullying now?" And I
Like,
remember just thinking, "What? Are you,
like you haven't
you
been in
know
school
where?"
now for years, and God, that hurts my heart because like you're a young child
And
trying to. Oh my
yeah, I
God.
was I was 17 at this point. And she then said to me, "We'll consider taking you on, but considering where you've been, you are a bit of a liability."
Sorry, my
So
mouth just fell open for anyone not seeing this on the video format. Oh my gosh.
that's what she said to me, and I remember crying the entire way back to the hospital
Oh my
because
gosh.
I thought, "Oh my God, that's it, like, because I've gone and sought mental health treatment, I'm just gonna be seen as an issue for the rest of my life."
Well, can I just say
That
you're the
wasn't.
furthest thing from an issue, the most fabulous person I've ever been
I
lucky
don't
enough
know
to
now,
meet.
Amanda, you don't live with me.
I know. Look, your husband, sure, look, what does he know really? No, I think I've met you now on a number of occasions and you light up every room you walk into and you inspire
Oh,
me. Oh God, I got goosebumps now saying it. Oh my gosh,
oh,
getting
thank
waves of
you.
goose. You do. Every time I'm lucky enough to have a conversation with you, I think you're pretty amazing every time. Oh God, I'm crying
Thank
next. No,
you.
I just think I'm so sad because if that was said to me back in those days, but you kept going though, didn't you? Like you didn't let
Yeah,
that stop you.
my
Like,
parents. I don't even know in hindsight if I told my parents what she said because I was so upset. My dad was driving me back and he knew that something was said that triggered me. But I don't think I could get it out. I suffered with selective mutism or struggled with selective mutism for many years. When I was a quite young child, if I was with anybody I didn't know, I just wouldn't talk. At school, it was fine. I had Amy. Um, but yeah, I would just shut down and not speak. And that, if I'm overwhelmed, that can still happen. I
Yeah.
either, I have an outburst of emotions or I just close in. And I think I very much just closed in there and didn't talk about it. But I did tell Sean when I got back, and he was like, look, sod them. They're not the school for you. They don't understand you. Goodbye. And he arranged the next one. And I went reluctantly, and they were like, what do you need? What are you interested in? Right, the
Amazing.
biology class is full, but we're going to get you in there because this is what you're interested in. And at this point, I wasn't diagnosed autistic. It would just goes to show you how, I suppose, little was known about.
It was very much back in those days, kind of negative view of autism, but in
Yeah.
particular, oh, boys were come as people that
Yeah, this
identify
was only
as autistic.
2013, so
Yeah.
it's not that
It's not,
old,
it's
like,
not the
long ago.
1980s either, though, but it just shows,
No, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it also shows possibly how well I was masking even in a 24/7 environment,
Mm.
where I'm being psychologically analyzed every day. But, yeah, I went into them and they were like, "Look, if you need to leave a class, just leave. Like, you don't need to explain yourself. If you need to go around the grounds of the school outside to get air, just go. Make sure you bring someone with you in case anything was to happen."
They're kind
But,
of ahead of their time back in those days.
yeah, my teacher was or the principal was just like, "Just do it. Like, there's no issues. We know that you need this." And there was zero, like, there wasn't a reduced timetable or anything official. They were just like, "Come in when you can. Go when you can."
Amazing,
I was
amazing.
18 at this point, and I had a year and a half there and did my Leaving Cert. For the Leaving Cert, I was given I was about to say a spare room, a separate room, an
Yeah,
extra time, um, under the diagnosis of anxiety at that
yeah.
point. And, I did my Leaving Cert and I got accepted into biomedical science in Brighton in the UK.
Wow.
Um, and that's when I moved to England, for 9 years. And yeah, I suppose I was incredibly lucky that that school were so open and accepting.
They kind of gave you
And
the safety to even to try, maybe not to fully be yourself, but to try and
oh,
come in and access
absolutely.
school again for the first time.
And from, like, a PDA perspective, there was no, pressure
It
at
was on
all.
your
There was
terms.
no demand.
It
Yeah,
wasn't compliance based,
100%.
yeah.
They were just like, I don't think I did my mocks, for the Leaving
I
Cert.
think it's pretty. You just literally went into the leaving cert, like you're just like badass. You're like, yeah, I'll come in, I'll do the leaving cert. I'm off to do biomedical. Another person be like, God, I don't know. You're like, yeah, just gonna do it because I can.
At that point, I think I was a bit cocky. I was like, "Jesus, this is grand. Off to England." Um,
Your
no.
parents must be so proud of you, but also so proud of you as that younger person as well, because God, tremendous, like what all you've been through already at that stage in your life, and now you're not only going to university, you're literally moving countries and studying a very, I would say, and it would be my speciality, biomedical science. Like amazing, amazing.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are very proud of me, and I'm proud of them. Like, what they did for me as parents, oh my gosh, like, they had so much hassle from, people we knew who were saying, "Oh my gosh, like, you're ruining her life, letting her not go in," and all of these things, but my parents saw, like, me unable to
They
breathe.
saw you like the real you, like struggling and
Yeah.
yeah.
And, like, I would go to the steps, there were steps up to the all-girls school. I would get to the bottom of the steps, and I wouldn't be able to breathe at the thought of getting in there, like, it was horrendous, and at the same time, online, while I was struggling and going, "Oh, I'm gonna get in for one class today," and that felt so good. So during those 5 years, I did try at various points, but maybe for a day, and then maybe next year I'll try for 2 days. That's how, diluted I suppose it was. Um
I totally understand that feeling though of not being able to. I remember I dropped out of school in fourth year. I went in for September. So obviously I was more than yourself. I was, academic, but I was academic in a very, I didn't realize the structures I was relying on. If you think about up to junior cert, it's all
Mm,
very like you're leading towards the exam, you're going to do the exam. And again, autistically, I never thought, well, what happens after the exam? Like, what are we doing next year? And then I got
mhm.
it. And fourth year in the school that I went to, it was all about like finding your person, who you are, and all the things. It
Yes,
was
yeah.
very scattered timetable. Nothing wrong with that, but for me, it didn't work for me. And I was in for September, and I remember I dropped out. I would say early October, and I can still remember my mother standing over the bed, being like, "Get up out of that bed and get into school." And I was like, I remember saying, looking up at her and being like, "You can stand there for the rest of your life," because I would definitely have a PDA profile. I was like, "You can stand there for the rest of your life, but I can tell you one thing: that will not be happening. I will not get out of this bed to go. I'll go and get a job, but I will not go back to the school." And I kind of left the school very dramatically, and I tried to go back. Then my dad kind of encouraged me to try and go back to do fifth year the following year. Couldn't do, dropped
Yeah,
out again. And then he said, "Look, work for the year, but please, for your own sake, X, Y, and Z, try and go back." And then he like
yeah,
persuasively said, "I know you love Galway. If it's not for me, it's like for yourself. If you think you can go back for your leaving," there was a private school in Galway at the time called Yates College, and he said if I felt I could go back,
yes, yeah.
I could live in Galway without any, because I'm one of 11, in my own little apartment or wherever. He'd pay for it, and off I'd go just to
That's amazing, yeah.
live the young girl's life in Galway. But basically, I went in and studied. It was like a in really positive terms, I liked it, very much structured concentration type studying for a year. Obviously,
Mm,
got an excellent leaving cert as a result. But the point is, I loved it because there was so much structure. I never had to worry. I knew it was happening all the time.
mhm.
But for you, then you went off to college. How did life? Because I'm just got conscious of our time. I don't want to end too soon on the story. So then you went off to college. What happened then, or did life become easier, or what did you find then?
So I thought I was doing well, and I think I was masking in sort of a new way. I found that socially, England is very different to Ireland, obviously, different culture and all that. But I don't think I realized how different England would be. Um, and I suppose to get into to just touch on something a bit difficult, I was in a terrible relationship with an English person, who I met and actually was in contact with before I moved to England. And that got very, very abusive, we'll just say. I won't go into it too much because that would just be a whole other story. Um, and it was very
Sorry.
difficult. My first year of university was very controlled, very, yeah, I didn't have a lot of freedom. And when I did, I was nitpicked on what I did, who I was with. And obviously, I'm
I
drawn
like feel
to
sad for you. Yeah.
the male presence more
Yeah.
so because more predictable usually. So that was a big, big issue. I broke off that relationship, which was a very dangerous, traumatic point where that after that
Yeah. And
happened.
you're over in a different country, away from your family.
Exactly. No, I obviously had their support,
Yeah.
as
But they're not
always, they're
right
fantastic.
beside you in moments of crisis. You have to make contact, but they're
No,
not there in person.
exactly. So I actually had to repeat my first year
Okay.
because of how invasive that whole thing was. And then I did half of second year. My health started to get very bad because I have multiple chronic health issues. So I actually never graduated. I graduated with a partial qualification. It's like
That's
higher.
still a major, if you look at the context of your whole life experience, like up to that point,
Mm,
including trauma, like that, really unkind relationship that you had to unfortunately experience, like that's still a major, major achievement. And at the back of it all, you've chronic multiple illnesses as well. Like
yeah,
just, I think you're, oh my gosh, you give me goosebumps thinking about it. So
thank
later
you.
on then, so moving on then from your life, when did you then go for, or when did it occur to you or maybe to clinicians that you might be autistic? How did that realization come for you?
Do you know what, Amanda? I read so many books on autism because I thought it was fascinating growing up.
Jesus, no, tell me more.
I read a lot of psychology books, and I never once thought I'm autistic because it was all from the male perspective,
And
and
it's
I
framed
was like,
negatively. Like, I feel when I used
very
to read
much
those
so.
books. Yeah.
Very much so, and, there was 1 or 2 that was, like, personal experience, and I remember thinking, "Oh, that's fascinating," and then thinking I got to 26, I had a lot of issues with I developed a seizure disorder, um,
Wow.
in 2020, and I, went through so much testing for that. My brother's epileptic, they thought it was epilepsy for me too. I had a really long stint of not being able to go to work, because of that, and lockdown and all that sort of coincided at the same time. And, I was diagnosed with non-epileptic seizure disorder, and I was told by multiple neurologists that I met in the UK that they see a lot of undiagnosed or late diagnosed women with this seizure disorder.
Oh, wow.
And they said, like, "You have a history of mental illness. Do you think there's a possibility that that's, something that's going on there?" So I sought a diagnosis back in Ireland, but I did it online.
Yeah.
And my lovely parents helped me pay for that. It was private. And I got the diagnosis, and I just, had this overwhelming sense of, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this explains so much," and
Do
I
you
was
feel like it was
blaming
like
myself
reeling
my
back
whole
all the
life.
years and trauma all of a sudden, like looking back,
Yeah,
because that's how I felt. You look back like suddenly all the
yeah.
years and all the positive
I
but
think
also difficult
the
moments.
scientist in me was like, "Oh, this makes sense. Like this. Here's all the list. It's obviously this." You know? And I just had such a sense of calm, and I actually was diagnosed a week before I got married, um,
Oh.
which
Two
was
poignant
interesting.
moments in your life, meeting the man of
Yeah,
your
very much
dreams, but
so.
also, getting married maybe to the man of your dreams, but also finally like stepping into your new life with the fuller
Yeah,
understanding of yourself. God, I got
it
goosebumps
really
saying
felt
that.
like that. It
That should
really
be like
felt
your
like
quote.
that. I felt like for the next chapter, like, I'm gonna know how to help myself.
Oh God, I'm
In
getting goosebumps.
marriage, I'm
Yeah.
gonna know how to help myself, and Alex knows how to help me too.
I've seen the two of you together, like you're very like like you're just very like in rhythm with each other, I feel. Or maybe that's just my totally misconstruing what I'm saying, but
No,
I feel like you're very much
yeah,
in the rhythm and I can see like you're moving. I remember I was down at the Ballina launch, or sorry, delivered training for yourselves down in Ballina to support the community. And I remember he was there, like help with the setup, and you're like, la la la. And it was just like very like flow. I would say that I
yeah,
can't identify with relate as in what I'm seeing because of social imagination differences. But I just remember thinking, oh, that looks like a really easy like flow of a relationship. I thought it was lovely,
yeah.
just the way you're interacting.
We we have a really great relationship, and I think I'm incredibly lucky in that sense.
And he's lucky
And it
too, married to an incredible lady.
Oh, thank you. And I would say so too. I tell him this all the time.
Just to
Um,
remind you.
yeah. No, he's fantastic. He understands me more so, I would even say, than my own parents now, because
Yeah.
I, spent 10 years nearly away from them, and in that 10 years I was with him. And
You grow into each other, isn't it?
he goes to so much effort to accommodate my needs, and he just gets what's going on with me like that. He knows exactly how to help me. He knows if I'm about to, like, have a seizure, for example, if I'm getting stressed and stressed and stressed, he's like, "Rebecca, go away. Go calm down. Go help yourself, regulate yourself." And even with our little baby, he'll, if I'm getting overwhelmed, he jumps in. Not that that's phenomenal. We should expect that of men, but he's like extra
Attentive.
helpful, attentive. Yeah, he
That's what I
could
noticed. It was
probably
just like you come into the room, he was like, you could just see, not that I was standing up now like some kind of hyper vigilant person watching people, but it was just, it stood out to me because I think on the day of the Balna training, I think it was only, as far as husbands and wives go, that was only yourself and himself there. Everyone else was like, just,
yes,
turn up. And I remember just thinking, God, that's a lovely, natural, like it was
yeah.
very like, I don't know, like a
Because of
dad.
my health, he does
Yeah,
come
he's
to
very attentive,
everything,
but on
basically.
both parts, though, you were just equally as lovely to him. But I just remember thinking, God,
Yeah,
that's a really special, lovely relationship.
yeah. I'm very, very lucky that, well, we're lucky to have each other. We could get through anything, is what we say to each other.
Can I
Um,
ask you then, Rebecca? So I suppose I'm watching the time, we're coming to close, but if you are, say, if there's a professional listening or a parent listening, and
mm,
if there's a child that, say, just like yourself, that's showing those like really,
mm,
I don't want to say like traits of being autistic, but would say that's showing themselves to the world as being different. And if they're
yes.
telling you school is different, and if they're telling you they're feeling anxious and they're having these tummy issues and all the things,
Mm,
what would your advice be if you could go back in time to the people that didn't really understand you, or if it's someone listening now that's on the fence about
mm.
what are the actual needs of a person? What would your advice be if you think you had any to give?
To believe them, I suppose, is the first thing. To accept that that's what's going on with them, and that's all right. School isn't going to fit everybody, and when a child is refusing school or showing massive struggle, or, sick, having sick days that potentially aren't a physical issue going on, you might think, "Oh, they're trying to get a day off school." That was, quite a common belief, not from my parents, but from other people. But the reality is children tend not to be that manipulative in my experience. I've worked with kids most of my life or adult life. You know, um, you might be able to do that one day, but for that to be consistent,
Believe them.
believe them, because there's something going on there. There's something definitely going on there. And I suppose, from a parent's perspective, I didn't go to school for a long time. I know that's not a possibility for every family because of work and everything. But, I didn't do my junior cert. I didn't have a lot of help throughout, but what I found was this love for knowledge at home because I was allowed to just use the internet, watch documentaries, like, do whatever I wanted, and it was never titled education or learning or studying or
There's
anything.
passion.
Yeah, I just found an interest in the world in my own sort of way, and I just had a great time, but that's what, learning should be.
Hmm.
Schooling is important, but if your child is struggling in school,
Their well-being
you
is
know
more important, isn't it?
you kind of have to crack open this new idea of what education is and what learning is, and ultimately, nobody remembers what they've done in their Leaving Cert, or I
No.
don't know anybody that remembers what they've
Neither
done
will
in their
actually
Leaving
have
Cert,
my, yeah, no, you don't know.
but everybody has nightmares about it. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And it
Um,
shouldn't have to be that education shouldn't, or access to education shouldn't have to be literally nightmare inducing. It should be,
mhm,
hopefully, for all people, which I know is not the case, but accessible, neuroaffirmative, but also takes really into account the lived
mhm,
experience of the students. If they're struggling, there it's that, I suppose, that equation from Dr. Luke Bearden: autism plus the environment equals the outcome. So the autistic person, the environment could be the school environment, the interaction, the atmosphere, the policies, whatever it is, equals the outcome. So if that student can't attend, we need to look broadly across all of the environments and
mhm.
domains. So listen, I'm going to finish it there, but listen, a huge thank you to the absolutely fabulous, as I always say, awe-inspiring Rebecca. And still, even though I'm hoping now we're good pals, you don't need to mask, still very funny. I know you're saying earlier that that was like a mechanism. I find you actually highly hilarious. Every time I meet you,
Thank
you're
you.
always cracking a joke. You're just, I think, outside the context of masking, I would actually say you're quite a skilled communicator, because you always put me immediately at ease. Every room I've ever been in with you, everyone is like at ease. You're just so, same
Thank
as
you.
your fabulous husband, but you've just a lovely genuineness about you. And it's like, maybe it's that autistic lived experience. You're taking on what the potential impact of your interactions with others, but also understanding they have their own lived experiences with them. So
Yeah.
I find that often with autistic people. Maybe it's the double empathy theory at play as well. But listen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I can't wait for everyone to hear your incredible story. And in the description of this podcast, I will have, if you're happy to, links to the Ballina Autism Friendly Town page, to the Mayo Disabled Persons Organisation. And if you want me to give any other contact details for yourself as well, I'll put that there as well. So listen, I'll bring it to a
Perfect.
close. Huge
Thank you for
thank you
having
to
me.
yourself, and thank you to all the listeners for this week. We'll be back again soon. So thank you. Bye.